Our first speaker this morning is John Murphy. John has been running his own consultancy business, John Murphy International, for over 10 years. He is an executive and online coach to business owners and professionals internationally, assisting them in mapping a plan of what they want to achieve and what they need to change in order to achieve it. Prior to setting up his own business, John spent many years as an executive director of Friends First. John now lives in France and runs his business from there. Thank you, John, for taking the time to be with us here today. John will share with us how we can stay top of mind when the prospect is ready to buy, to be strategic about our keep in touch activity, and to engage with the influences in our marketplace with integrity and authenticity. Can you please give a warm Cork welcome to John Murphy? Thank you.
That's a good start. And it's great to be here in Cork. And I must say, it's a great honour for me to be here speaking to all of you in the LIA. I have a long association with the LIA, as many of you would know, because I was a member for many, many years in my insurance career. And I also would have been involved in various conferences that have been held through the LIA and going back to the Brendan Glennon days, which is dating me a little bit. But it really is fantastic to be here. And I know, and I'm a great admirer of what the LIA have done. Sorry, I just better look at my watch because Josephine told me to be on a time limit. So I better make sure I'm doing what I'm told. But I'm a great admirer of what the LIA have done in terms of the whole educational side of the industry, and really in terms of raising the standards. But I was delighted when I was talking to Seamus and to Pat and to Josephine earlier this year, when they said they want to do something that was very much around sales. Because, and Seamus said it earlier on, at the end of the day, you know, we can be terribly well educated and we can be terribly knowledgeable, but if we're not selling and we're not getting clients, then we simply don't have a business. So it is really, really important because, you know, no matter what we call ourselves or whatever title we have, you know, we're all selling. Because if we're involved in a business that needs to generate income, and I don't know really of any that comes to mind that doesn't, but if we're in a business that we need to be selling. So it is important for us to focus on that. What qualifies me to talk to you here today, and probably many of you are asking the same question as I am, is what qualifies me to stand here and talk to you about selling, and also to talk to you about, to share some thoughts with you. Well, the fact of the matter is I've been in sales all my life. I started my insurance career with the Royal Ivor, selling door to door, and I moved to direct sales, then into broker sales. I was broker manager for a couple of companies. I set up a direct sales force, and I've been on the board of a life company. And it doesn't really matter what title you have in all of that. At the end of the day, no matter what job it was always about selling, because that's what we do. And even in terms of the work that I did within Eureco, which was looking at the European market, again, you were out there and you were selling. So selling is kind of very much in my blood. I set up my own business, as Josephine said, about 10 to 11 years ago. And I set up my own business. Again, that's selling. Because if I don't sell, if I don't find clients, then I simply don't have a business. I can give myself whatever title I like, be a consultant, be a business coach, be a managing director, or whatever. It doesn't matter a damn. I am selling. And that's what I do for a living. And in the business that I'm in, and the clients that I work with, excuse me, I work primarily with professional services companies. So people like yourselves, and I do a lot of work with financial advisory companies, some here in Ireland, others in the UK, in the US, and in Australia. And when you're looking at the professional services business, it's about relationships, because that's what we're managing. We're managing relationships with people that we come in contact with. And we must remember that that's what we do. So it's actually about maintaining those relationships over a long time. And that's really what I'm talking about here in terms of keeping in touch. We need to be putting ourselves in front of people on a consistent basis. And we can do that in various different ways. Nowadays, we don't have to do it just face-to-face. There are lots of different ways we can do it. I do it in my own business. Most of my Coaching is done online, is not done face-to-face. So there are different ways that we can do this and stay top of mind. But you know, when we're talking about a business, what tends to happen, and I think we've all been guilty of it, and certainly I can put my hand up and say that I have been, is that we do a certain amount of kind of business generation, and then we get into business fulfillment, and then we complete that, and then we look around and say, well, where's the next one? And so we end up with these kind of peaks and troughs of business, which ends up with peaks and troughs in cash flow, which is not the healthiest situation for any business. And to me, generating leads is the equivalent of cash flow in a business, because that's what we need to do. We need to make sure that we have a process and a system that is just going to continuously generate leads for us going forward, that we don't have these peaks and troughs in there. And really, what we talk about here is, is a process of making sure that we are generating sufficient leads all the way through. And if we look at it, why we're not generating sufficient leads, well, there are a variety of different reasons. We're not getting as much from existing clients as we should. We've got a poor pipeline because we don't keep feeding that pipeline. We're not doing enough presentations. I was talking to somebody yesterday. I was coaching a client yesterday before I came over here. And I was saying, well, in reality, when you're talking about their business targets, and I'm saying, okay, well, how much they expected to achieve in the month of May. I say, well, how many appointments, how many sales appointments have you got between now and Friday? And the answer was 2. I was saying, well, that means probably have to have 100% success rate with those in order to achieve your targets, which is really not stacking the odds in your favor. So not having enough presentations, not having enough referrals, and I want to come back to that. And the consequence is that we simply don't have enough leads. One of the interesting things that I came across recently from Harvard was that 74% of clients will give you referrals if you keep in touch. If you keep in touch. And that's the caveat. Now that is an enormous percentage. And for all of us demonstrates how much we're leaving on the table by not being proactive in terms of developing relationships and getting referrals from people that we might get referrals from. And I'll come back and I'll talk a little bit about that. But what's the consequence is that we're having too few conversations. But we're having too few conversations with the right people at the right time. And I say that very, very carefully. And when I talk about the right people, I'm talking about, and we could do an entire seminar on this particular point, but the right people is having your target market. And one of the things that I do in my own work is when I'm talking with businesses and say, well, who is your target market? And generally there's a little bit of kind of, it's this, or it's company directors, or it's high net worth. That's not an answer. That's not a target market. That's kind of an enormous group. It's like saying, my target market is accountants. Whereas it KPMG, or is it somebody on, in the South Mall that's got, one person working for them? Very different depending on what it is. And I interviewed somebody recently, because I do a lot of podcasting as part of my own marketing and getting my own brand out there. And one of the people I interviewed, I came across him through the LIA magazine, Michael Kitses. I hope some of you have read his articles. If you haven't, I highly recommend that you do. Michael is a really serious commentator in the US and the whole arena of financial services, but particularly focused on financial advisors. And his kind of reason for being is actually to elevate the profession of financial advisors. And he's a very technical guy, by his own admission. To give you an example, I think he's branded his blog The Nerd's Eye View. So that gives you an idea of kind of the sort of techie guy that he is. But I was interviewing him about where he sees financial advisors, what he sees the issues and all of that. And I asked him the question, what is the number one challenge facing financial advisors? And this is on a global basis, not just in the US, because Michael speaks all over the world. And to quote what he said, the biggest challenge, and I was expecting him to talk about Changes in regulation, changes in, tax and all that sort of stuff, and changes in structure of policy, changes in remuneration, all of that. But that wasn't his answer. His answer was, it's a crisis of differentiation. That they're not differentiating themselves. They're not seen as specialists. And I think it's a very valid point. So when I talk about not having the right conversations with the right people are the people that are in your target market. They're the people that you have identified where you specialize in providing them with the service. And having conversations with the right people at the right time is at the time that when they are ready to buy. Because the fact of the matter is that while we all might like to think that we are so wonderful and so impressive and so mercurial as salespeople that we determine when the clients buy, that's not the truth. The truth is that the client will buy when the client is ready to buy. Excuse me. And we've got to remember that. And what happens too often is that we do go through the process, we do all the fact find, we do all the gathering the information, then we present and the client doesn't do the transaction. And what happens very often, and let's be honest about it, we've all made the mistake, and I can certainly say that I have in the past. Don't do it now, because I learned. But you move on and said, okay, that's not going to be a client. And you move on to somebody else. But you don't always know what's going on in that person's world. You don't know of other situations that they need to do. They might not want to admit to having the money. It mightn't be the right time. They want to do an extension of their house. They might owe money to their brother-in-law, whoever it might be. So there are circumstances at play that maybe you don't know. So you move on. If you've done your work right, and assuming you have, the need still exists, but it hasn't been satisfied. But at some stage in the future, when that individual decides, now I need to actually satisfy that need that I have, where are you? You probably have found that you moved on. But if you think about what Mark McCormick said, that people buy from people that they know, like, and trust. And that's about relationships. And this applies whether you're talking about online or whether you're talking about offline. I said I've got a mixture of business. I've got an online business and an offline business. The same business, but they're transacted both online and offline. But people still buy, and Mark McCormick, who is the founder of the IMG Sports Management Company, said that many years ago. And it's still true today. But it's about building that relationship. And you build that relationship over time. And what you've got to remember is that when we're actually building that relationship, we build that relationship through our sales funnel, our sales process, or call it whatever you like. But the sales process, it looks like this. It's about familiarity. So people come in contact with you. I'm not saying that they've actually may not have met you, but they may have heard about you, or they may have seen something you wrote, or they may have somebody who said, I know, Seamus Fox, who's done some great work for me. And what are they going to do? They're going to try and familiarize themselves with you. They're going to try and find out. They'll Google you. They look you up and you look at your website. Because they want to get to know you. They want to get to know, are you the right person for them? Are you the person that is going to be dedicated to them? I was talking to somebody recently who's a financial advisor, and he was telling me that he had met or had been introduced to a consultant obstetrician, and he'd gone through the fact find, done everything, and made a presentation, a whole lot to it. Everything went terribly well, but he didn't get the business. And he was kind of mystified as to why he didn't. And after a lot of probing and a lot of discussion with, challenging the person, why wasn't, eventually the consultant said, well, I don't see you as somebody who is dedicated to me. I don't see you as somebody who is dedicated to working with the medical consultants. Now that may be fair or unfair, but it's a reality. He didn't see this particular person as somebody who was dedicated to them. And when somebody's checking you out and they're becoming familiar with you, they want to have a look. So if you go back and have a look at your websites, and have a look at your website and see, does that reflect who you are and who you work with? Then I suggest you need to do something different about it. But they really want to go on and have a look and say, well, might you be the one? Might you be the one that will really work with me, that is dedicated to me? It's also about building trust. I'm not talking about trust in regard to money, but trust that you will deliver. Trust that you will fulfill the commitments that you make. Trust that you will be there. Trust that you will support them. Trust that when the challenges come up, when problems come up, that you will be around. You've got to demonstrate your values. And again, that's got to be clear. Because don't forget that buying is not really a left-brain logical decision. If we think about the major purchases that we've made in our lives, and for most of us that would be buying a house, right? How many of those are logical? They're not. I've never bought a house I could afford. I don't think anybody else has, right? Probably can afford it less nowadays, but anyway, that's a separate conversation. But you don't buy it. You buy it because of some way of connection. Well, actually, in my case, it was my other half that made the emotional connection, and I just went along with it, because that's what tends to happen in my house. And but it isn't a left-brain logical decision. You make an emotional connection, and that's how we do business, particularly in relationship businesses. But then that person becomes, a lead, is somebody that, potentially might do business with us. They qualify themselves in some way. You meet each other, or you get introduced, or whatever it might be. And then to become a prospect, where you're in discussion about becoming a client. And then ultimately becoming a customer. But again, going back to what we're saying, people will buy, and the client will buy when they are ready to buy. They will go through that sales cycle at their own pace. Now, that's not everybody will go through that sales cycle, and I'm not saying that's the perfect sales cycle. But it's pretty much got the component parts that you need. People will come in at different stages. There will be people who contact you because they just want you to transact something. I'm not saying everybody will go through that. But if you look at that as a process, that's a whole relationship building process that you've got to go through with those clients. And each step of the way, you've got to be building on that relationship. So when you're looking at your sales cycle, you've got to understand what it is you're doing that's going to move them through each step and each stage of that sales cycle. Because you've got to do different things at different stages in it. But when that prospect, when you've gone through the whole process, you've made your presentation, they have decided for whatever reason they are not going to transact business with you, then you move on. And what happens? When the client is ready to buy, where are you? Now, we'd all like to think that we are so extraordinarily memorable that a year down the road, when they've decided that they're going to buy, that they're going to say, oh gosh, I do remember, that was such a wonderful presentation, and that was such a wonderful, well put together proposal. I will go back. They might, but let's be honest about it. The chances are they won't, particularly if you have not been in touch, because you haven't demonstrated anything. So what we're talking about here is keeping you top of mind, keeping you front of mind, and everything about marketing. I'll talk a bit about marketing in a few minutes, because it's not a term that I'm particularly enamored with. But everything is about staying front of mind. I could give you examples from various clients of mine, but to give you an example in my own world, I had somebody that I had proposed to, I'd say about 7 or 8 years ago, to do a piece of work with their company. We didn't do it for a variety of different reasons. I think I probably went back, and I think I probably had a go at pitching again once or twice in that intervening time. But again, didn't do anything and didn't make any progress. But I stayed in touch with the key person. And I stay in touch. When I'm talking about keeping in touch, I want to make it clear, I'm not talking about having an email list where I'm sending it out to everybody at the same time. That's a valid and that's a perfectly valid method of staying in touch with people. This is not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about one-to-one keep in touch. But I did keep in touch with this person. I knew the areas of interest to them. I was sending them stuff out. I'd get the odd comment back about, that was interesting, or thanks for that, or whatever it might be. Most times I get nothing. But about 6 or 7 months ago, he rang me up, and it's one of the legal firms. And he said, just came out of a meeting with the partners, and we were discussing something that we need to do with some of our key people in the organisation. And I thought, you're the guy I should call, because I got an email from you yesterday, and it just reminded me. Now, with the best one in the world, I'd love to think that he'd remember the proposition that I made to him 7 or 8 years ago, but he wouldn't. Not in a million years would he do it, right? I stayed front of mind, and he gave me the call, and that resulted in quite a bit of business. I had another phone call only 2 weeks ago from somebody, again, a company I did some work with, and I've stayed in touch with those people, and I got a phone call from her, and she said, listen, I'm just transitioning out of the company that I'm in, I'm setting up my own business, and I'd like to work with you to actually help me to make that transition. Would never have happened if I hadn't stayed in touch. And there are loads of examples like that, and that's how I get my business. And for many of my clients, putting this process in place, that's how they get their business. It happens regularly to me, and it happens regularly to my clients. And let's be honest about it, it's the easiest way of getting business. I mean, after getting business from existing clients, getting business from the network that you have and relationships that you have is the second easiest way of getting business. But, and there's a big caveat in this, when you actually start doing this, you must be consistent. This is not something that you do when you think of it, or when it's raining and the golf is called off. This is something that you've got to make sure that you're doing on a consistent basis. Because when you do it on a consistent basis, people actually get to expect to get something from you. And it also demonstrates something about you, that you have got the consistency and you are always out there helping and supporting and offering information that is valuable to them. It cannot be on an ad hoc basis. If it is, it's a complete waste of time. And what I'm talking about here, I just want to repeat it again, I'm not talking about a newsletter you send out to your entire email list. Nothing wrong with that, I do that myself. But I'm talking here about individual one-to-one keeping in touch. And it is really important that you do that, as well as doing the broad newsletters that we all send out. But when we're talking about keeping in touch, we've got to make sure that it is strategic. I say that it is, you've thought it through. You've thought it through in terms of the people that are going through that cycle that we were talking about. You're also thought it through in terms of who are the people you're sending what information out to, that it is resonating with the people that you are sending information out to, and that it is relevant to them. And that's really, really important, that what you're sending out is relevant to them. It must be about sharing your values. So what you're sending out must actually be a reflection of the values that you have in your business and in your life. And you've got to demonstrate that in the way that you communicate with them. Because it's got to be about what you stand for. Now, it doesn't mean that you can't send something out that you disagree with, and you can actually say that you disagree with it and why you disagree with it, because that's also a way of demonstrating your values. But you've also have got to make sure that you're building trust with it, because it is about, that you can be relied upon. And the fact that you are consistently sending out information that is valuable to them, and you're not asking for something in return, that is demonstrating that you can be relied upon, but it also demonstrates that you are dedicated to them, and you are dedicated to serving them. And at the end of the day, in professional services relationship, that's what you need to be. And the last point is that it's adding value. Adding value and relevance. If I could take the word marketing out of parlance, it's not a word I like because it's bandied around and people don't have all sorts of different connotations about what it means. But relevance to me is the most important thing. You might send me something that is beautiful and glossy and fascinating, but it's about boat building. And I know nothing and care less about boat building, right? So it can be great because you love it, but it's useless to me. And all it's actually doing is reflecting to me, this guy doesn't know an awful lot about me. So you're doing yourself a disservice. So it's really, really important that when you're sending out information, that you're sending it out, that it is relevant to them. But when we're talking about our network, we have different relationships with different people. So we have to segment our network. It can't be kind of a one-size-fits-all. We have different relationships in that network for different reasons. Now, I'm not going to try and segment your network, but I give you an indicator of how I've segmented my own, just to give you a kind of a sense for how I do it, and then you can just apply the same principles. But the point that I'm making is that it's not a one-size-fits-all. You do have different relationships in your network for different reasons. And if I talk about the ones that I would have a segment in my network where there are event organizers, because I speak at conferences, I attend conferences, I want to know what conferences are taking place. So there are people that I want to stay in touch with, and I want to have a very particular type of communication with them. I have a segment that are potential joint venture partners. I have got joint venture partners that I do some work with, a bit in Ireland, I do some in the UK, I do some in the US as well. And they are joint venture partners that I have where I would do work with them, and then vice versa. And they're also people that I would like to have joint venture partnerships with, and they're in that particular segment. And again, I've got a very particular type of communication I want to go out to them. Different to the first one. And these are all different to each other. Clients, pretty obvious one. I want to have communication with them, but again, I want to have a particular style and a particular, flow process that I actually want to share with them. I have a segment that I call direct outreach, and what I call direct outreach in my parlance, there are people that I don't know yet. I don't know, I've never met them, but I've identified them as people who I believe can help build my business. But I've never met them, but I want to get to know them. And I want to reach out to them to actually make contact with them and build a relationship with them. But I said, they don't know me just yet, but they will. Leads, obviously we get leads. I want to communicate with people that are already leads, and how I communicate with them is different. Influencers, these are people who I do already know and can influence my business, and again want to communicate in a specific way. Past clients is a pretty obvious one. And referral partners is another. And I would have a relationship with 5, which I could refer to as my gang of 5, referral partners where we refer business to each other. And again, I want to have a relationship with them. And, it's really important that we do have those, clear in our own mind. What are the different relationships I want to have? Now, your segments will look, very different to that I put up there. That's fine. But, segmented, don't have a one-size-fits-all. Be very clear about the different segments and be very clear how you're going to communicate with them. But what I would say, that the critical elements is that you need to have a process and a system. You've got to have a system to do this. This is not something that you can just decide to do when I think of it, decide to do when I'm not all that terribly busy, because all that results in is the same, the peaks and troughs that we talked about earlier on. And that's what we're trying to avoid. You must have a system to do it. There are plenty of systems out there to utilize. The one that I use, and I'm happy if anybody wants to get in touch with you to share with you, I don't have any shares in the place, by the way. I'd love to have it. It's a system we call it, it's a US system called Contactually. And I like it because it's simple. and I'm not a techie, even though I have an online business, I'm not a techie, but I find a very simple system, and some of the other systems that I tried, I found that I would have needed to go on a FOSS course. Well, FOSS don't exist anymore, do they? Whoever they're called. But they were terribly technical and terribly complicated and complex. But this one's actually very simple. But there are plenty of systems. That's not the point I'm making. But the point I'm making is that there's got to be a process. It's got to be integrated into your day, that you do this on a daily basis. If you leave it until when I have a free moment, when I'm slack, when I'm in the office, when I'm at home at night, maybe I'll go in early one morning, it just won't happen. It's got to be part of your daily ritual. I'm big into rituals because I think if you have strong rituals in your life, it says an awful lot about you because you've got discipline about doing things. But it's got to be integrated into your daily routine, that it's prompting you to take action. It's prompting you to actually take action on a daily basis. In these systems, they say, well, what am I going to say every day? For God's sake, what am I going to talk about? Well, listen, there's no shortage. There's loads of information. It is the glory of the technology today is that there is a wealth of information. You can share some of the stuff that you write, if you write. You can share stuff that other people write. And I would kind of have a principle about it that, 80% of the time I share other people's stuff and 20% of the time I share my own. Because I write a lot of articles, I do a lot of podcasting, I do a lot of webinars, things like that. But you don't want to be all about you. It's very much about bringing useful information from other people. The like of Michael Kitces is a good example. He is so prolific in what he... I marvel at the amount of writing that he does. I don't know how he works, because he just produces, he's so prolific. But there are loads of sites where you can get in. If you don't know whether, get in touch with me and I'll send you, loads of links that you can get. There's no shortage of information, and the systems will help you to share the information. Here's an interesting article that I got. I thought this would really, you'd really find this fascinating. Again, it's about the relevance. But you can store the articles and you can share them. But I said it's got to be about frequency and consistency. And consistency can be once a year. I accept that, but that's not what I'm talking about. It's got to be frequent. And you've got to make sure, because don't forget, marketing is about, making you front of mind. If we can get rid of the word marketing, that's all it's doing. And marketing doesn't sell. Marketing makes people aware of you. You've got to do the selling. But you've got to be front of mind. You've got to stay front of mind. And it's got to be this one-to-one communication. So it's got to be clear that, he's actually thought about, or she has thought about me when I'm getting the email. And it's got to be, kind of natural, that it's a natural thing. It doesn't seem forced, it doesn't seem uneasy, it doesn't seem comfortable. And the last part I said, it's always, always adding value. It's always something interesting, it's always something useful, and it's always something that is relevant. When we go back to the... Frank, am I stuck there in the slide? Okay. When we go back to the sales process, is what are we doing about keeping in touch right through that process? Because if I'm looking at what is taking them from the initial, that actually makes them go from the initial to the familiarity. Then when they get to familiarity, that they say, yes, this is somebody that is dedicated to me, and this is somebody that will serve me well. Then what am I doing that's going to bring them to the next stage, and then to the next stage, and right through to being customers? Because that's the challenge for us. That is the challenge for us, to do that, and to communicate on a one-to-one basis in order to make sure that we're achieving it. Let me share with you what my routine is, and this is what I recommend to my clients. And it's about every day, because this regular contact will result in increased trust, will result in strong relationships, and will result in more sales. If you do this, you will get more sales. There is no doubt about that. I have seen this time and time and time again in my own business, in my clients' businesses and in other businesses, because it ain't any different and it hasn't changed a heck of a lot. But just talk about my daily commitment. I get in touch with 7 people every day by email, one-to-one email that I send out, and the system helps me do that. I make sure that what I send out is relevant, and I make sure that what I send out is of interest to the people that I'm sending it to. I introduce 2 people in my network to each other, right? Because it's not about putting my arms around and being protective about my own network. Now, these are 2 people that are, they could have something in common. Somebody might say, listen, I've got a need for whatever it might be, and I know somebody, I just put them 2 in contact. Or it could be simply, I know that they're both interested in cycling or hill walking or golf or whatever it might be, but they should meet each other. And I do that because I want to make sure that I'm making my network live and that it's coming to life. And of course, by the law of reciprocity, the more you do that, the more people do it back to you. And that's a simple law of reciprocity, and it works. Okay? It does work. So I introduced 2 people. And the last thing I said, sorry, just go back. No. The last thing I do is I reach out to one person that I don't know yet. And this was my direct outreach bubble that I showed you earlier on. Because, again, this is something that left to my own devices, without being prompted to do it, frankly, I wouldn't do it, and I'd never get around to doing it, and I would never get in touch with people that I don't know yet, but I believe could seriously influence my business. So that's my discipline. So that means that I'm getting in contact with, and I said this is the system that I use with my clients, or get my clients to use for them. That's 10 people every day that receive a personal email from me. That's 50 people a week. And that's on top of any meetings I have, any business I'm transacting, anything else that I'm doing. That's 50 people per week. That's 200 people every month. That's a lot of people. There isn't a snowball's chance in hell I could get in front of 50 people per week or 200 people per month. But I'm front of mind with that number of people. How long does it take me to do it? It takes me between 15 and 20 minutes every day. That's all. If you've got the right system, you can do it. But the point is that is that number of people that receive something from me, that get something from me, whether they open it, whether they read it, or whether they don't. I know people that do, and I know that people generally do, because it's an individual. It's not a kind of a newsletter. There's a system that I use for doing newsletters, which is completely separate. But if you're front of mind with 50 people every week, don't you think there's a really good chance when they decide that they want your service, that they're going to get in touch with you? The fact of the matter is that I know that keeping in touch does get more sales. Again, it's going back to the contact with the right people at the right time. It's staying in contact with the right people at the right time. Be clear about your target market, staying in touch with them, and doing this in a very, very strategic way. It's demonstrating that you are there for them. It's demonstrating that you can be relied upon. It's demonstrating that you are there to serve, and we are in a service business. It's demonstrating that you will always be present for them. I can guarantee you, and I don't say that lightly, I can guarantee you, if you do this, and if you walk away from today, and you can walk away from today, and you can start this today, your business will grow exponentially as a result of doing this on a systematic, strategic, organized way. If anybody wants any more information about it, they can just drop me an email. My email address is there, go on my website. I'll share any information I have. But the point, I want you to walk away today understanding that this is not rocket science. And, when Seamus said earlier on in the morning, kind of sharing new and old ideas, this falls into the old ideas category. This ain't something new, but the fact is that most of us don't do it. But I can guarantee you that if you do this, and you do this in a strategic way, you will get more clients, you will build more clients, you will build a sustainable business for yourselves, and you will never, ever be short of clients, and you will smooth that business out. Thank you for your time. I hope you found it useful.